All right, good morning, everyone. Call the meeting to order. Transportation, Finance, and Policy Committee. There's a quorum present, and today is Tuesday, April 16th. All hearings are recorded and live streamed by House Public Information, and we have the minutes from April 9th, 2024. Representative Petersburg, have you had a chance to review the minutes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move the minutes of the April 9th meeting.
Thank you very much, Lead Petersburg. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The minutes are approved. All right, today we have 5 bills on the agenda. We have limited time today due to committee room being reserved at 10:10, so we must adjourn at 10 on the dot. So I ask that presenters keep bills presentations to under 10 minutes and testifiers to 2 minutes. And so our first bill today is Chair Hornstein's House File 5242 to be in front of the committee. And then this one is just informational, right? Or is this one? This one will be laid over. All right. So Chair Hornstein, will you do you have a motion for us?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would move that House File 5242 be laid over for possible inclusion.
From last night.
Thank you very much.
Finance bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And if you will proceed with your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. And this is sort of this is the supplemental budget proposed by the administration. You know, I am open to some suggestions on this. This is just a kind of a basis for our bill. This will be the vehicle for our bill. And so we want to just go through it, and I'll have MnDOT testify. And we will have some additional information on this coming from Chair Lee as well. So we have the tribal worksite training program. There's a facilities capital program. There's a need for improvements in MnDOT facilities, particularly as they have a facility in St. Cloud that is from the 1960s era, and that needs to be upgraded. You know, we also have information for the additional testers, which I think is very, very important in terms of getting our situation straightened out with the backlog in the testing for drivers, licenses, et cetera. So I'm going to have MnDOT come up and talk a little bit more about this bill, and we'll have some more discussion from Chair Fu Lee about the bonding portions of this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And we have MnDOT here. So if you please say your name for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, for the record, my name is Josh Knetter-Hubinger. I am the CFO at MnDOT. I'll cover the MnDOT elements of the supplemental budget in Chair Hornstein's bill. There are basically 3 provisions. One would be a statutory provision to allow us to stand up a state tribal training program. There's a similar one already in existence on the federal side. So this would just in statute explicitly allow us to incentivize the hiring of tribal members for transportation projects in and around tribal projects. There's also a variety of technical fixes to the bonds that were authorized last session in Chapter 68. So there were 4 earmarks using trunk highway bonds that were authorized but pointed to local entities, and that's not allowable under the Constitution. So in this bill, it would just change that to being earmarks for MnDOT to be able to spend those funds. So that's 4 projects totaling almost $150 million of trunk highway bonds. I should mention for all 3 of these, they're net neutral. So those bonds were authorized last session. They're already counted against the various policy limits. So essentially, this is just allowing us to spend them, but they're still being counted. In that same authorization of trunk highway bonds last year, there's also an issue with the $87 million appropriated to MnDOT for facilities. So that facilities language would be a new program calling out how we would pick future facility projects funded for MnDOT. And then that would be the reference for that 87 million that we received last session. And then finally, there's, again, some authorizing language that would just explicitly allow us to collect passenger rail revenues. The most immediate need for this would be for the second train to Chicago, the TCMC project. That's close to being up and running. It would also have some impacts for eventually for NLX. But again, a technical fix, just explicitly letting us collect those revenues and some additional guidance on how we can spend those funds. And with that, I stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Knetter-Hubinger. Any questions right now? All right, seeing none, thank you very much. We will move on now to Mr. Sam Brown. What? Oh, got it. You are Sam Brown for us today. I appreciate it. You did a great job.
I'm doing double duty today.
Perfect. Thank you. And then we have Pong Zhang. Director Zhang, if you could come down, please. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Good morning, Pong Zhang, Director of the Driver and Vehicle Service Division. And I have a slide deck that I'm going to try to pull up. Good morning, Chair Hornstein, Vice Chair Tabke, and members of the committee. Pong Zhang, Director of the Driver and Vehicle Services Division, and I'm here to share some information about the request that's in this bill. Just as a high-level kind of sharing, this is some of the stats from this last calendar year that DVS has, or work that DVS has undertaken. Just really proud of the work that the division's done and all of this under our current appropriation. For Class D specifically, we provided over 200,000 knowledge tests and 143,000 skills tests, CDL 90,000 and 13,000 of those being skills tests. This is an interesting statistic that we wanted to share with the committee that where we see individuals going into the metro or leaving the metro to take an exam. So in calendar year 23, 20,000 individuals from the metro leaving the metro to go take their exam in greater Minnesota, and then 1,900 leaving greater Minnesota to come into the metro to take an exam. In this supplemental budget, the government recommends $2 million from the DVSOA to hire 22 additional examiners. You know, we think that these additional examiners will allow us to meet the 14-day goal required in statute. And then just lastly, here's some stats from other agencies, other states. We put a result or a survey out to AMVA requesting all states to voluntarily submit information. This is for research purposes only, and so we are sharing kind of some states reporting that are very similar in size to Minnesota. And you can see that in Louisiana, 75 exam stations, 300 examiners, and then down to Missouri, 143 exam stations with 219 examiners. I think the closest comparable would be Wisconsin with a very similar size population. With 92 exam stations, and they have 216 examiners. Currently, DVS has 112 examiners doing this same and similar work. And again, we believe that the additional resources will allow us to reach that 14-day goal. I know we're very short in time, so I appreciate the opportunity to provide an abbreviated presentation. I'll stand for questions.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioner. Do we have information on what the wait is currently for examinations?
Mr. Chair, Rep.
John.
Petersburg, thank you. While we don't have an exact wait time that we're tracking, we know that there are individuals who need an exam, who are eligible for an exam, and that there are appointments that all of our appointments are available, are taken. There are appointments open daily, and we open appointments 30 days at a time, so every day we add an additional set of appointments. Those get taken up, and then when appointments are canceled, those become available to Minnesotans as well. But we know that we're not meeting the demand that's in the state, and that's the reason why we put together this request.
Lead Petersburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just kind of a follow-up. So we know that some driver exam stations are closer proximity to larger populations and tend to be filled up more, and then others may not be. Do we have kind of a range on those that are more of a hot spots that are really always full versus those that maybe have more opportunities? Because, sometimes the spots open up 6 hours away in Minnesota, and that doesn't really help. So I was curious if we have any more information on how we're doing here in the metro area and surrounding suburbs as well.
Director Zhang.
Mr. Chair, Rep. Petersburg. We do have statistics, or we know when what appointments are available. On the website, when Minnesotans go to make an appointment, they can expand their search to the whole entire state of Minnesota. And yes, in greater Minnesota, especially in the far north and the far south of the state, we generally do see more appointments available, and that is driven by the demand in that local area.
All right, Representative Elkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Zhang, are all the 112 positions you have filled? Are you having any problems hiring to fill the positions that you get?
Director Zhang.
Mr. Chair, Rep. Elkins, we do currently have all 112 positions filled. We are working very closely with our HR department and our fiscal and admin services department to streamline and prioritize those fills. And so that is an active prioritization. We're using funding from from our other areas of the division to help bolster that, so that we always stay fully staffed. But hiring has been a challenge. We've had to post and repost several positions, and turnover continues to be a challenge that we work through. Again, this is a very high priority for the division, and we're working very closely with partners to make sure that we keep positions posted and filled.
Representative Murphy.
I can follow up with one. I was just wondering, you talked about the 22 new people, and it looks like there's a migration going to the cities to take the test. So where will those people be hired? I mean, either we're going to focus on the metro, or is it we're going to look throughout the state?
Director Zhang.
Mrs. Chair, Rep. Murphy, we want to put the positions where we can get the most Class D exams, and in order for us to produce Class D exams, the examiners need to be only working on Class D, and that's the intention of these positions, is to increase our Class D skills tests. In order to do that, they need to be at an office where they have full-time lobby staff, and the examiners are doing full-time examiner work. In our smaller offices, our examiners work the counter, take applications, they administer the knowledge tests. I mean, they're kind of a one-person shop in those offices. In our bigger offices, like here in the metro, Duluth, Rochester, Mankato, St. Cloud, we're going to see offices where they have full-time lobby staff, where the examiners are doing exams for their entire shift, and that's where we're going to be able to create the most capacity with these positions. Our intention is to create as much capacity as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I really appreciate you sharing the survey results, but it's pretty stark. And while 22 seems like a good number, it still seems that we're going to be far behind other states of similar size. What gives you confidence in that 22 number? How'd you come up to that? And so just looking at that, I still have concerns.
Director Zhang.
Mr. Chair, Representative Kraft, thank you for that comment. The intention with these positions is that they would focus solely on Class D road tests. We wanted to propose something that could achieve that result. What we don't address in those positions are the need for additional knowledge testing in our Class D space, our need for additional CDL testing, motorcycle testing, there are other exam activities that are not going to be bolstered by these positions. And our hope is that by addressing our Class D, that we're able to then shift resources after our Class D demand is met to those other areas. But I wanted full transparency. We do have a need in those other areas. We wanted to focus first on Class D.
All right. I have one last, and you may have said it earlier, Director Zhang, but the 112 examiners, is that what you have currently that are funded, or that's currently what you have on staff?
Mr. Chair, the 112 is what we officially can fill in with our current appropriation with permanent funding.
Got it. Thank you. Any further questions for Director Zhang? Thank you very much. Any questions for Chair Hornstein before we wrap this up? All right, seeing none, Chair Hornstein, closing comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members, and I think we'll be taking a look at this core bill and entertaining some amendments to improve it, and be open to that from both sides of the aisle.
Thank you very much, Chair Hornstein. With that, Chair Hornstein moves that House File 5242 be laid over for possible inclusion, and 5242 is laid over. Next on the agenda, we have 5057, which is my bill, and we'll be switching places.
No, we'll go for it.
Yeah, we'll get you up real quick. And actually, we just take him first. We get you first.
Representative Tabke, do you have a motion?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I make a motion that House File 5057 be laid over for possible inclusion in a future bill.
Proceed.
Thank you. So House File 5057 is a bill supporting law enforcement and safety throughout the state of Minnesota, and so it supports what's called the Lights On program, and so it is a voucher system where when someone gets stopped that doesn't have that has a tail light that's out or a headlight that's out, and we'll have other testifiers to explain in more detail. But when there's some urgent need that has to happen for the safety of everyone in the roads that we have in Minnesota, there is it builds on a voucher program so that up to $250, police, law enforcement, troopers, anyone can give a person as they see necessary up to a $250 voucher to have a light replaced or wherever they see need to be able to use that to make sure that we are creating safer road systems throughout the entire state of Minnesota. And Mr. Chair, we have some time constraints for Chief
You have
Hodges
an
here.
amendment as well.
Oh yeah, I forgot about my amendment. Thank you very much. It's a technical amendment that just cleans up a little bit of the language. So I would appreciate everyone's support.
All right, so discussion. Representative Petersburg.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This did resolve one of the questions I had in regards to where the money was coming from. Coming out of the special revenue account, I think, is a better direction than HUTD, and so I appreciate that. But we'll have further discussion on the bill later. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the motion prevails. Proceed.
That's all I have for right now, Mr. Chair. If we could move to Chief Hodges so that they can get on with their day, because we've got the conference today.
It's they pay me to go to all these meetings, I guess.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm Chief Booker Hodges, Chief of the Bloomington Police Department. I'm here just briefly to talk about the Lights On program. The city of Bloomington, we hand out more lights on coupons than any agency in the country other than the Jacksonville Police Department. This allows us to, when we're interacting with people for petty misdemeanor traffic stops, we're able to give them this coupon, which allows them to get their vehicle fixed. In Minnesota, it's not just a metro thing. There are over 600 places throughout the state where people can go get their vehicle fixed. As we all know, a vehicle is oftentimes someone's most valuable asset. So from a law enforcement standpoint, when we're interacting with people, to be able to provide them with this has been an invaluable tool. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat it as being an agency in Hennepin County. We still do conduct the most traffic stops out of any agency in Hennepin County and Bloomington. We do believe that continuing to get out here and keep our public safe by conducting traffic stops is one of the ways in which we do that, and that's why our crime is low in our city. So, but this is a tool that allows us to positively interact with the public. Thank you.
Representative Tabke.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And we also have John Harrington, who is here to talk more about the program itself.
Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. My name is John Harrington. I am the CEO of Microgrants, and Lights On is one of the programs that Microgrants has been offering for the last 6 years. Can I proceed? In 2016, after Philandro Castillo was killed, the board of Microgrants, Joseph Aggio and Don Samuels, asked the question, was there something that the philanthropic community could do that would prevent this from happening in the future? And they came up with the idea of what would happen if instead of a ticket and a conversation around what you have in your car, if instead we solve the problem itself, which is that there's a light out on your car, headlight, tail light, turn signal out, which makes your car less safe to drive on Minnesota roadways. And they came up with the idea, and they asked about a handful of police departments around the state if they would do it, and they said yes. Columbia Heights, South St. Paul, a bunch of suburban departments all took this on. And it was initially, that's that initial 12 agencies. That has now grown to over 140 agencies in the state of Minnesota. We are in 112 police departments. We're in 22 sheriff's departments. And the State Patrol 4 years ago adopted us and is in 4 districts of the State Patrol. It has continued to grow because chiefs of police have found that they get great response from the public about this interaction. In fact, literally, after every stop, we give when they have their voucher redeemed, they do a survey, and 99.2% of the people that do the surveys, and we get a large return on the surveys, say that they had a really good, highly favorable or favorable interaction with law enforcement when they had that stop. So the chiefs like it because it gives them validation that their officers are out there stopping cars for violations and that it's a very positive interaction. It's also very valuable to the public because it reduces traffic safety issues. According to NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Institute, about 50% of crashes at night involve a car that has a equipment violation, headlight, tail light, or turn signal light that's out. So this is reducing traffic safety issues also. And then finally, what we hear finally is the local businesses benefit from this. What we do is we have recruited 600 repair shops in the cities, and it's all over the state of Minnesota, that will take these vouchers. Those vouchers then become a vehicle for that local business to get new business. What we hear from about 40% of the people that get the vouchers is that they did not have the money to pay for the repair on their own. And so by giving them the voucher, it really is solving a couple different problems. One, it's likely that equipment violation would not have been fixed if it wasn't for the voucher. They just didn't have the money to get it fixed. Number two, it's going to get fixed quickly because the voucher is good for 2 weeks. And we made it 2 weeks very intentionally to make sure that people had an urgency to get into a repair shop and get it fixed now, not just wait for a good time to come around. And from the business community, what they say is this brings new people into their local businesses. because they see these new customers coming in, and they hope that maybe they'll come back, and that they'll come back for other repair services. We make a very intentional focus on trying to recruit businesses that are veteran-owned, minority-owned, and women-owned. But as I said, we've been able to recruit 600 businesses across the state. Lights On has been because we had a very generous donor at the very beginning, free to every Minnesota department that has wanted to participate in it. We have a list of departments that would like to participate in it, but the donors fund has run out. We will no longer be able to offer Lights On as a free program in about a month. We have literally run that fund down to zero. And unfortunately, that donor passed on, and there is not a new funding source that we can find in the philanthropic community that will pay for the entire state of Minnesota. We have been able to find individual donors for individual cities, but even in Minnesota, that has been too small to be able to actually handle the volume that we have. We're getting good support from our corporate supporters also, and I think this is a win-win-win from what we can tell from the people. The cops like the program because they like the fact that they're solving a problem. When they walk up to that car, they know that when they give that person the voucher, they're likely to not just have a tag that's going to go to warrant, where the car is going to get towed away or something else. They know that they're going to actually get that light fixed. The person that gets it likes it because it solves their problem. They feel really good about it. And a story, if I may take just a quick second, Chief Henry from St. Paul, who was giving these vouchers out, they were doing a traffic program, talked about he gave this voucher out. He pulled a woman over for taillights out, pulls her over. Woman apparently is living in her car. The car is full of her belongings, and she is looking really like this is going to be a really terrible day. He comes up, he says, hey, here's a voucher, get your car fixed. And she thanks him for it, and he pulls off and does another traffic stop. About a block away, she pulls up behind him, flashed her lights at him, and said, can I talk to you? He says, yeah, sure, did I forget something? He says, I just want to thank you. I'm living in my car. I was certain when you pulled me over that you were going to tow my car and all my stuff was going to go away, and that I don't have any money to fix this. I can fix these lights now, and my car's not getting towed. And she asked me if she could give him a hug. That's the kind of stories I get from chiefs of police about the response they get when an officer pulls somebody over for the voucher. We are very excited about continuing to offer this in Minnesota. And as I said, there are more departments in Minnesota that would like to do this program. And I'm hopeful with your help that we can make that happen.
Okay, any additional questions? Yes, Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
West.
So there have been a number of mentions to the State Patrol in the testimony from the individuals who have been up there, but I'm looking at the eligibility here at Subdivision 2. It just says counties, cities, towns, and local law enforcement agencies, including law enforcement agencies of a federally recognized tribe, are eligible to apply for grants under this section. Am I misreading this? Would the State Patrol be eligible for these funds under the current language, or do we need to change that, or maybe the State Patrol doesn't want to participate any longer?
Representative Tabke.
Mr. Chair and Representative Olson, thank you very much for that question. I really appreciate it. That was troopers are not included in the original language for whatever reason, oversight, but they have been added on in the other body, and they will be as this moves forward. If this moves forward, will be added here so that the troopers are included on that. So we have a plan for that to be included there, and if anybody, Mike Hansen from DPS is here as well if anybody has any questions for how troopers would utilize the program.
Okay, Representative West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got two, I believe, simple questions. So it's a max voucher of $250. Is there anything in here that, so say I run an auto repair shop, somebody comes in, hands me a voucher, I go, oh, well, this headlight change is now $250, sir, because they can just max out, and it doesn't make a difference to the person receiving the service. So is there any verification that the charges back to the state are reasonable charges?
Mr. Chair and Representative West, thank you very much. I don't know if Chief Harrington's going to come down and talk about that.
Mr. Chair, Representative West, yes, every voucher that comes in, we validate we have to have the voucher and the invoice, and we do a reconciliation with the invoice. On average, most vouchers in Minnesota run about $100. Some run as high as $250 because more modern vehicles require a headlight assembly rather than simply a bulb. But we do validate that every voucher is in fact just for the bulb and the labor that's required to fix headlight, taillight, or turn signals.
Okay, follow-up? Yeah. And then Representative Petersburg.
So another question, which might be relevant for the commissioner. I have a number of repair shops in my district that deal with Intoxilock, and they have a whole lot of grievances with working with the state, and just not going to litigate those, but they want to provide the service, but the state does make it difficult. And is any repair shop eligible? Do they just follow instructions on this voucher, or do they have to be pre-approved in some way?
Mr. Chair, Representative West, we asked the local police departments to identify reputable repair shops that we can then have a contract with. And the contract is with Lights On and the repair shop, and so we pay typically within 2 weeks of getting their bill and the voucher attachment. So it is not going directly through the state. We're the administrative arm for that. We are open to taking additional repair shops because as we grow the program, we've had to add on repair shops. We asked the local police department to help us validate legitimate, reputable businesses because we don't want to have vouchers taken by somebody that might, in fact, rip off a driver or a motorist unintentionally or intentionally. So.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the questions I have, first of all, I want to start out by saying it is always a good opportunity when we can show compassion and understanding to help people that really are needing help from us. And that's something that we should always endeavor to do in all of our lives, no matter what it is. A couple of questions in regards to how do we determine who gets the voucher and who doesn't? Or are we giving the voucher to anybody that stopped for a lights out?
Mr. Chair, Representative Petersburg, Lights On is agnostic about what the policies are for the police department. Most of the police departments that we work with simply give them out. If you get stopped for an equipment violation, they will give you the voucher. That is up to the discretion of the officer, and we don't impose any policy or suggestions on that. I think it is notable that of the many vouchers that are given out, about over 50% are redeemed. The other 50%, I think, are probably folks that didn't feel like they needed the voucher to get their car fixed or their car was under warranty.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you. I just was curious about that because it's tough enough to be a police officer rather than trying to determine who qualifies or not. So it sounds like you give it out to everybody. So if I have a light out and it gets really expensive, I just drive through town a few times till I finally get stopped. Maybe I can get a voucher for it. I'm speaking a little facetious there, but it is kind of interesting to know exactly how that was implemented. And we're talking about a fairly substantial amount here, $1.2 million, that is coming out of a special revenue account, which is paid for basically by people who are driving vehicles as well. And that's also another challenge that I have with it is because there are many people out there that pay for all of the maintenance of their vehicles, et cetera. And a portion of sales tax goes to transit and dollars go to this and the other. And the point is that, as you said, I think it was you, the largest asset some people may have is their car. And that is important for us to also understand that with that comes a responsibility. It comes a need for us to try to figure out how we deal with the assets that we have. And that's sometimes a struggle for some, and sometimes it's difficult for others. So how we balance that, I'm not sure exactly how we go about it. But this is another situation in which we're taking the responsibility away from individuals and putting it on the backs of taxpayers. And we shouldn't just do that lightly. And so I'm just sharing with that a concern that I think we have to be careful because eventually it could be homeowners that need new windows. And so we need the state to come in and fix that or whatever. I mean, it just continues on. when we're all become adults, we all have to become understanding of what we need. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't support those that are needing a help up. And I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we have to be careful about doing these carte blanche, across the board things without understanding what the ramifications are and whether or not it's something that is not only beneficial as a whole, but is something that our constituents also want us to support. I mean, there are many other ways of funding this other than just through this. For example, we could have a checkoff on a driver's license or whatever that's saying, would you like to donate so much of this towards a particular project, which might be the lights on bill. But to just automatically take it without giving people the opportunity doesn't really give them an option to also participate in the program. So just some ideas to think about. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You represent Petersburg. Anyone else? Closing comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members, and thank you very much to Chief Hodges and Commissioner Harrington and everyone for being here to talk about this important bill. So this is our Shakopee Police Department has used this for years, and it's a really great program that causes a lot of really, as we've talked about, positive interactions between police departments and motorists when they could be negative interactions. This really helps to move that forward so that we are able to have safer communities and safer roadways and making sure that we are getting there. So I just appreciate folks' support and discussion on this bill as it moves forward. So with that, I renew my motion that House File 5057 be laid over for possible inclusion.
Thank you. And just before we move on, I think you had mentioned to me, Vice Chair Tabke, that there were a number of law enforcement agencies that are in support of this. Would you be able to share with the committee?
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. If there's a packet in everyone, in our packet for today with a lot of different, many different law enforcement entities who are in support. The best one is on the front, Shakopee, so thank you very much for doing that, Mr. Baumann. So we've got that. There's also more information about the program in your packet, as well as from Hennepin County, from Bloomington, from Egan, I believe, and a variety of other law enforcement institutions, including the Police Chiefs Association, including the Troopers Association, and others. So it's really very widely supported by law enforcement, and thank you very much for pointing that out, Mr. Chair.
Okay, with that, we will lay over this House file and as amended, and thank you very much,
Thank you.
Vice Chair Tabke. So our next bill on the agenda is House File 5182, and Representative Lee. Welcome to the committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. So House File 5182, Mr. Chair, if I could just
Hang on,
jump in. Or
let me move that House File 5182 be laid over for possible inclusion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So House File 5182 requires the Met Council to prepare and submit their detailed revenue expenditures for the transportation components under their budget. At a minimum, really want to understand their actual revenue, expenditures, transfers, reserves, and balances in each of the previous 4 budget years, and also for the forecasts, the state forecast. And, I think this is really important for all of us, for this committee and for the Capital Investment Committee as we consider our budgets. And so I think this information will be really helpful. And with that, Mr. Chair, see if there's any public testimony, and I'm open to questions.
Okay. I do believe we have Chair Zally here.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chair and Representative Lee. I
I'm here, Charlie Zelli, and Chair of the Metropolitan Council, and I'm here to testify in support of 5182. You know, in this past year, with the advent of a sales tax supporting transit, it has had a fundamental shift in the foundation of our transit system. We've been able to address the structural deficit, which was massive, and in addition to covering the full costs of all transit ways, which were previously paid for in part by counties. And then also, very importantly, we're taking on what was previously unfunded, the capital maintenance, which is not in any one year, but over the years, a very large burden, and really assures that we maintain this full transit system in a state of good repair. There's 13 more items that were listed as priorities, so we address that as well. We are in the process of studying in great detail over a period of time what the costs, what the different programs will entail. In fact, we've hired Baker Tilly to do this analysis, so I think that we will be in great shape to issue this report to provide both transparency and also, frankly, accountability to the legislature for every aspect that this transit system provides. Important also that it's not just sales tax. We have certainly general funds. We have motor vehicle sales tax, fares, federal appropriations, and so this would be a comprehensive look. So we appreciate Representative Lee's interest. We've given just a preliminary snapshot about what we know so far, but we really want to get it right. And saying that, I believe this summer will be important work as we put our policy arms around the various programs. And frankly, we won't need to wait until April. I mean, I know that there's an amendment, certainly in the Senate, to bring this to perhaps December, and we think that's an appropriate date, given you want to have this information prior to the next budget legislative session. So with that, I really be happy to answer questions, but I want to very briefly say that we think this is a good idea, good governance, and it really helps Met Council because it clarifies exactly what this program is.
Thank you, Chair Zelli. Questions? Representative Lee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, community members, and thank you to the Met Council for their willingness to take this on too. And I think that it is really important as we continue our work into the futures to understand the actual budgets of the Met Council.
Thank you very much. Any further member questions? Okay, with that, House File 5182 is laid over. Next bill is, you think you'll stay here on the testifying table? And I will move that House, I'm sorry? This is informational only, sorry. 5220, which deals with some of our issues around bonding. Chair Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House File 5220, just for all of you to know, this is the governor's bonding recommendations bill. And so I think the interest and the chair in bringing this forward is to have an informational hearing on the provisions relating to trunk highway cash and whatnot. And, I think it is best for the MnDOT to be here to present the governor's proposal to all of you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. With that, we'll have MnDOT come up. Welcome back.
Please state your name for the record.
Good morning again, Mr. Chair, members. Josh Kennedy-Hubinger, CFO at MnDOT. Go through the transportation items in the bonding bill very briefly. There are 6 requests in the governor's proposal. 4 of them are funded with trunk highway cash, and 2 are funded with general obligation bonds. So it's a total of $77 million for transportation projects that would go through MnDOT. I'm not touching the portions going to Met Council or some of those entities. I'll go through these very briefly, and then happy to answer any questions at the end. So we have $40 million of trunk highway cash for high priority bridges. This continues to be a need for MnDOT despite the additional resources from the federal IIJA and the state money that was received in the 2023 session. We're still projected to not meet our performance measures on bridge condition. There's still quite a bit of need there, and so this would just be a kind of one-time infusion of additional state funds to help leverage all of those new federal funds and to provide some targeted money for improving those areas in bridge. There's some $4.8 million in trunk highway cash related to drainage asset management. So if you look at our most recently completed 20-year long-range plan, some of our ancillary assets, which includes things like culverts, are in pretty poor condition. And so this $4.8 million would allow us to do some intentional work around inventorying those culverts, getting us into a position to improve those. They're just not meeting the needs as they were constructed for the most part quite a few years ago. Item 3 from trunk highway cash, there's $7.8 million for some targeted truck parking safety improvements at 2 rest areas around St. Cloud. I think everyone's aware that's quite a need, finding additional truck parking along the highway system. There's another $20 million of trunk highway cash for facilities. So this is in addition to unlocking that $87 million I spoke to earlier from last session. Overall, across our facilities, we have about $200 million in deferred maintenance needs, and so this would be some additional resources towards those needs. So those 4 items are all funded with trunk highway cash, a total of about $73 million. That cash would be covered from the existing trunk highway fund balance. As of the February forecast, there's about $160 million. So those proposals would take about half of that existing fund balance to cover those 4 trunk highway cash items. And then there's 2 fairly typical programmatic requests funded with general obligation bonds. There's $2 million for highway rail grade crossings that would get about 4 or 5 improvements at those rail crossings, and $3 million for ports across the state. That would be in addition to the $18 million we received last session. Went through that very quickly, but happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Representative Petersburg.
Thank you. So the ports and railroad crossings, which, is that coming out of general fund?
Chair Representative, yes. So those 2 items are a total of $5 million. Those would count against that $980 million overall enterprise limit.
Additional questions? Representative Murphy.
I see that there's $37 million in it for the Met Council. What other money is allocated to the Met Council? Seeing that our in the last bill, we had up to $2.1 billion going to them in 2027? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair, I would defer to our friends at Met Council if they want to speak to that, or Chair Lee?
Mr. Chair, I think it will be best for the Met Council to come and talk about their recommendations from the governor's office.
Mr. Chair, members, I'm Judd Shetman. I'm the Government Affairs Director for the Met Council, and I apologize, I did not hear the question. I just was told that there was a question about the Met Council, so I figured I better come down and try to answer it.
Sounds good. I just noticed in our prior bill, we talked about the new revenue stream that's coming from Met Council with the 0.75 tax. And in this bill, it talks about $37 million. What other income streams does the Met Council get from MnDOT?
Well, Mr. Chair, Representative, the Met Council does not receive funding through MnDOT. We receive different appropriations from the state. We have the motor vehicle sales tax, which we receive, which was previously 36%. Now it's like 34.3 based on the funding bill last year. We received bonding appropriations regularly from the from the legislature, we received general fund from the legislature, and then just last year, we were able to receive the 3/4 cent sales tax, where we get roughly 83% of that for regional transit. And that is, all of these funding streams that I just mentioned, I believe are what Chair Zelli just mentioned as well, are what we are going to be providing, how we are going to be using those dollars, and showing what those revenues are. And that would also include federal money, fares, and the whole kind of gamut of different funding resources that we have. So we'll have all that information for you, but if the question was, what funds do we receive through MnDOT? We don't receive funds through MnDOT. They're all appropriated by the state or else through our federal partners.
Mr. Chair,
Or-
just the total, if I could just get a total number as far as what type of income or dollars you get other than the .75.
Mr. Chair, I will send an email to the committee this afternoon with that. I can't tell you that right off the top of my head.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And just to clarify, it's a portion of that sales tax does go for roads and roads and metro area as well.
Mr. Chair and committee members, yes, the funds that come to the council of the 83% are for regional transit purposes. There's 17% that is provided to the metro area counties, and they can use it for however they would like. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, any further questions? Okay, thank you for that information, and then I think you can stay where you are, because our next bill on the agenda is House File 3588, and I'll move that 3588 be in front of the committee and give an A4 amendment.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to present House File 3588. I do have a A4 amendment, if you guys will adopt that, please.
Can you explain the amendment?
Yes, so, Mr. Chair, just briefly on the amendment, and I will incorporate that into my remarks along with the advocates I've been working with. So the A4 amendments, addresses or attempt to address some of the concerns that were raised in the Senate hearing on the other side, namely, we're scoping this down to not just all Greater Minnesota Transit, but those in the urbanized areas, and also requiring an off-ramp from MnDOT when they prepared this transition plan to account for constraints, adding in, constraints around utility interconnection and funding, in addition to what we already have as a constraint to allow for exemption around technology, infrastructure, bus availability, and other specified constraints. And then we also add a prioritization of deployment of zero-emission transit buses based on the extent to which they are provided in environmental justice area as defined under the MPCA statute. And that's the amendment, Mr. Chair.
Discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, the motion prevails. To your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Our transition to a clean transportation future is well underway here, with regards to, some of the efforts that you guys led on last session. And this bill continues that momentum by, requiring a plan, a tool for us to look at how could we have, our transit buses, across the state and urbanized area and the those within the Met Council area, look at procuring zero-emission buses, and also to have the MnDOT go through the process to create this transit agency plan to implement the transition. And so, like I mentioned before in my amendment remarks, we provide exemptions that allow for that requires MnDOT commissioner for reasons of technology constraints, utility interconnections, funding, bus availability, and other reasons as an off-ramp for these agencies that may identify, when they go through the planning process, that they have some of these concerns. And For those that, are curious, the greater Minnesota portion only applies to urbanized areas such as Duluth, the East Grand Forks Transit, Lock Cranston-Apple Express, Mankato Transit System, Moorhead MAT, Rochester Public Transit, and St. Cloud Metro Bus. And Mr. Chair, I do have some testifiers here who can talk more in depth around the requirements that we have in this bill.
And Chair Lee, can you talk about a little bit more about the off-ramps, we had talked a lot about, there may be some challenges in implementation. And so what are some of the areas in which these agencies can have flexibility in implementing this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the bus procurement exemption starts on line 2.20 under subdivision 7, and to specifically your point around the determination from MnDOT is from 3.4 to 3.10. That exemption could be granted, if the applicant has made good faith efforts to follow the guidance and recommendations of the transition plan, and that, that the procurement requirements is not feasible within the specified time period due to technology, infrastructure, and then with the amendment, we added utility interconnection, funding, bus availability, or other specified documented constraints.
So there are off-ramps, if you will, if these agencies cannot procure.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Testifiers, we have first Anjali Baines, followed by Josh Hodek, and we'd like you to keep it to a couple minutes. And we'll have a timer, so when you hear that, then you'll need to wrap up.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair, Representative Lee, and committee members. My name is Anjali Baines, and I'm the Transportation Policy Lead at Fresh Energy, a 30-year-old nonpartisan, nonprofit clean energy advocacy organization based in St. Paul. Fresh Energy is thrilled to see House File 3588 build on the success of previous sessions by setting an even clearer path for more electric transit buses across Minnesota, focusing on the metro area and other urbanized areas and vehicles that can carry more than 15 passengers. At its core, this bill is a much-needed planning tool to help more transit agencies in the state figure out how to eliminate emissions from their bigger buses, which is necessary for us to meet our state climate goals. It will also help lawmakers and advocates like us better understand the challenges to make the switch to electric buses so that we can find the solutions to overcome them. Crucially, as has been mentioned, this bill also provides an off-ramp to the 2030 purchase goal if the challenges prove too much in the short term and need more time to resolve. This bill could also spur more clean energy jobs right here in Minnesota in areas like Crookston and St. Cloud, where New Flyer of America builds its transit buses, including electric ones. Finally, given the tremendous amount of federal funding available to electrify buses and tackle air pollution, there is no better time to put Minnesota on the map as a leader in electric transit and attract more of that funding here so that more Minnesotans can enjoy clean, healthy, and affordable transportation. For all these reasons, Fresh Energy supports this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions of the testifier? Okay, next we have Joshua Hodek, followed by Kathleen Schuler.
Good morning, Chair Hornstein and members. My name is Joshua Hodek. I'm a senior program manager at the Sierra Club, the oldest and largest environmental advocacy organization in Minnesota and the nation. As you know, last winter made history as the warmest on record. Parts of our state experienced their wettest and snowless December, either breaking or challenging records. Last weekend, I took my daughter swimming at the beach. The water was cold, but the temperature was nearly 80 degrees. Climate scientists say these extreme temperatures and lack of snow this winter was due to two factors, El Nino and climate change, mostly from our use of dirty fossil fuels. These weather extremes are not normal, they're not acceptable. Minnesota is in a climate crisis, along with the rest of the world. We need to lead on comprehensive solutions. Transportation, as we know, is the #1 source of climate pollution in our state. We have heavy-duty vehicles on our roads, but there's less of them, but they pollute more. So clean transit is a major part of the solution. We need expanded service, and we need cleaner buses, serving especially our most vulnerable communities. So this is not an either-or situation. The climate crisis demands a both-and response. House File 3588 will set the stage for a path to achieving zero emissions with more clean electric transit buses in our biggest cities across the state. It will provide us with a Google map, if you will, updated regularly as conditions change to get where we need to be. Without charting a course, setting a goal, we won't make the progress that we need. I urge you to get the app,
Thank you. so
support the roadmap. Thank you.
much. Thank you. Next, we have Kathleen Schuler. And then we'll have Judge Shetnan and Sherry Mundy. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record.
Good morning, Chair Hornstein and members of the committee. My name is Kathleen Schuler. I'm Policy Director with Health Professionals for Healthy Climate. We are pleased to support House File 3588, which will help accelerate the transition to zero-emission public transit buses that will reduce climate impacts and protect communities from toxic diesel pollution. Communities with higher proportions of people of color, indigenous people, and low-income people have greater exposure to air pollution. These neighborhoods bear the greatest harm from vehicle pollution, but are the least responsible for it. BIPOC and low-income people are more likely to live in high-traffic areas, placing them at highest risk for exposure to traffic pollution and more susceptible to its adverse health effects. Air pollution both contributes to and exacerbates underlying health inequities in these communities, which experience higher rates of asthma, diabetes, heart disease, infant and maternal mortality, cancer, and overall shorter lifespan. Most public transit buses are diesel fueled. Exposure to diesel exhaust is associated with higher risk for lung cancer, severe allergic, asthma attacks, and cardiovascular disease. Long-term exposure to air pollution can lead to hospitalizations from pneumonia, lung and heart diseases, and cause an early death, and has been linked to an array of chronic health conditions. Those living near transit corridors have the highest exposure. Electrification of heavy-duty vehicles such as buses will realize health co-benefits and result in significant cost savings. For example, a single zero-emission bus can eliminate 1,700 tons of carbon dioxide over its 12-year lifespan, the equivalent of taking 27 cars off the road. The faster we reduce climate pollution, the more lives we save. In addition, the EPA said that each federal dollar invested in clean diesel projects has led to $11 to $30 in savings from public health benefits. Replacing diesel buses, especially in urban areas, will improve air quality, resulting in improved health and more lives saved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Judge Shetnan, followed by Sherry Mundy.
Mr. Chair.
Welcome to the committee.
Yep, and members, my name is Judd Shetnan, Government Affairs Director at the Metropolitan Council. So thank you for the opportunity to speak on House File 3588. The Met Council, including Metro Transit and the Metropolitan Transportation Services, appreciates Representative Lee's efforts to support zero-emission bus technology and its benefits. We too are committed to advancing zero-emission bus in our region. We developed a zero-emission bus transit plan in February of 2022, and Metropolitan Transportation Services developed a zero-emission bus plan just last April, and I have copies of these plans available if anybody would like to look at them. Zero-emission bus and the supporting technologies that enable them, including charging infrastructure and onboard batteries, have been maturing in the past decades with the pace of improvements and reliability and the economies of scale accelerating in more recent years. Many transit agencies have had increasing interest in zero-emission buses, but the commercial adoption of such technologies has not been widespread. The adoption of zero-emission buses is affected by supporting infrastructure production and supply chain constraints, electrical grid capacity, and the rapid pace of zero-emission bus innovation and the limited production capacity in supporting infrastructure manufacturers. The Metropolitan Council's transition plan identified several objectives and strategies to address and mitigate these issues as barriers and constraints with the transition exists. As Metro Transit's experience and knowledge of this technology grows, these strategies and objectives will be continuously updated to reflect current best practices and lessons learned as additional experience is gained. With our current plans, the Council is committed to delivering environmentally sustainable and transportation choices that are safe, convenient, comfortable, and reliable for our customers. Currently, the Council has 8 battery electric buses in service on the Metro C line, and in February issued a notice to proceed with New Flyer for 5 battery electric buses to support the Metro Gold line in 2025. Later this month, Metro Transit will advance 2 business items to the Metropolitan Council to purchase 20 more battery electric buses with the supporting infrastructure for these buses. And these purchases are made possible in part due to the FTA's no and low emission grants that Metro Transit received in recent years. Also this month, Metro Transit will submit our 2024 low and no emission grant application seeking up to $90 million for additional funding from the FTA to support facilities improvements for zero emission buses, purchase 35 more battery electric buses, and support workforce development associated with this zero-emission bus fleet transition. And we'd like to thank Chair Lee for his letter of support for that grant. As the Council continues to move forward with the zero-emission plan, it is important to establish milestones and performance measures to maximize the benefits of the region while staying true to the mission to provide reliable service to customers. These milestones and performance measures are imperative to ensure a seamless transition to zero-emission buses and the guarantee of service. Our concern is a final transition date of January 1st, 2030 may not be sustainable for this new and emerging and evolving technology. The Council recommends continued monitoring and updating of our zero-emission bus plan as this technology evolves. And setting a hard date does not consider these factors. I'll wrap it up in just 1 second. We appreciate the opportunity to work with the committee and Chair Lee to continue the advocacy for zero-emission bus. And just last month, we had a number of advocacy groups over to our Haywood Transit facility to receive an update on our current zero-emission bus plan. This was an opportunity for us to show our ongoing commitment, but also be able to have folks understand the challenges that we're facing. So thank you for the opportunity to testify on this bill, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shetton. Questions? Okay. Oh, Representative Cagle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Shetton, are you guys just looking at electric? Zero emission means a lot of different things, and in my community, we have Cummins who is doing hydrogen fuel cells, and so it would be really cool if we could have a Minnesota business working with a Minnesota business to build these buses, and so just kind of curious about that.
Yep, Mr. Chair, Representative Cagle, we currently do not have any hydrogen-based buses in our system. We have been asked this question before. I think we're interested in any new technology that is coming about. I will note that New Flyer is based in St. Cloud, and so they are. We did a tour up there. Mr. Chair will remember. Many of us went up to St. Cloud a few years ago and took a look at that facility. And this is really a sun-rising technology, and so it is very exciting. And that's one of our concerns with this bill, is that having this date of January 1st, 2030, it's very hard for us to be able to make sure that the manufacturing, that the reliability of all of this and the charging equipment, that we're able to pull all this together by that time. But I want to be absolutely clear, we support zero-emission bus, and we do this through our plan. And I appreciate Chair Lee for continuing to push on these efforts. And it's just a matter of what we're able to do in the time frame that we have. And so, Mr. Chair and members, if there are any other questions, I'm happy to take them. Thanks.
Ms. Runyon.
I brought along a handout, Mr. Chairman, and to the committee administrator, I apologize for not getting it here sooner. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Sherry Munyon. I'm representing the Minnesota Public Transit Association. Our mission is to support transportation alternatives that improve the quality of life for people in communities large and small, urban, suburban, and rural. I want to first thank Representative Lee for taking the time to meet with me to discuss his important bill. MIPTA appreciates the goal of cleaner buses and new transit investment and wants to work with the legislature in making this transition to zero-emission buses, as well as increasing access to transit across the state. As pointed out in the Transit Equity Report from the Sierra Club, Labor Network for Sustainability, and Institute for Policy Studies, there is a particular unmet need for meaningful public transportation options for residents in rural communities. I also want to note that in moving people to jobs, school, medical services, public transit reduces greenhouse gas emissions by 33% less per passenger mile than the average single occupancy vehicle, and that's with just 28% of the seats occupied. The reduction increases to 82% for a typical diesel transit bus when it is full with 40 passengers. Transit systems and manufacturers must be involved as partners with the transit agencies in the collaborative development of any transition plans. And we also urge a longer implementation timeline than provided in the bill. We appreciate that the plan will explore many issues, including potential barriers and constraints. Some of these include the initial cost of vehicles, and the additional cost of vehicles is also a factor because the diesel buses can run longer distances and hours than the electric buses, so it's not a one-to-one replacement ratio. There will also be infrastructure to house and charge the buses. Typically, more buses will be needed, and they may not accommodate all the changes. We have to take a look at, again, the timeline. We think that the timeline is too short. We know that infrastructure is scarce in greater Minnesota. We believe if we move forward in this timeline, we have a recipe for brand new electric buses sitting unused in garages. So again, we urge that the agencies bring back a collaborative report addressing all of the issues that are raised, including both startup funding and ongoing funding, with a timeline for transitioning before the purchasing goals are adopted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? Representative Petersburg, then Representative.
Mr. Chair, I was just wondering if you're willing to have the pages distributed to her handout, or is that something that you would prefer?
You have the handout for distribution?
Yeah.
Did you have a question?
No, I just want to know if you do.
Representative West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was paging through the fiscal note and got to page number 9, which I'd encourage
I saw that. Yes.
all our members to look at, and it is very understandable. I really appreciate our fiscal staff, but really quick, in 2025 dollars, a 40-foot bus is 1.4 million for an electric, 890,000 for diesel. They would need 3 electric buses to every 2 diesel buses, which makes that even more expensive. A 60-foot bus, 2.3 million to 1.1 million for a diesel. Charging equipment, 375,000 with 1 charger per 2 buses. Facility retrofit is also $200 million per facility. And all in, it says it would be about $6.5 billion to implement this. Now, so I can understand the desire to reduce carbon emissions, but when you think about $6.5 billion, if your goal is to reduce carbon, you could end the nuclear moratorium, replace a bunch of coal plants with new nuclear in Minnesota, and subsidize it with this $6 billion, and lead to significantly less long-term greenhouse gas emissions. So when we're looking at this program's very ambitious and has good goals, it's an incredibly inefficient use of tax dollars, because there's a lot of ways to do this if your goal is reducing carbon emissions. And there's also the idea of feasibility. Supply chain issues, acquiring all these materials for this massive rework, especially because demand is going through the roof for all these technologies. And then really my chief concern here is, well, chief concern is it's $6.5 billion. But if you rush this kind of new tech, it's like you're buying an HD DVD player instead of a Blu-ray. You don't know what new technology is around the corner. And as Mr. Shetland already testified, Metro Transit is working down this road. So if our goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, this is an incredibly inefficient way to do it. And lastly, so this would make building out bus transit a lot more expensive, which is something I know, I would say there's a lot of bipartisan support for more buses in particular. This would make it even more expensive to build out bus infrastructure, which we need more of. And if the goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by getting people out of their cars and onto a bus, you're making it harder for that to happen because buses will get more expensive. Cars are getting more expensive too, but you have the freedom to go where you want with a car. So I would say the goals of this bill appear to be misguided in implementation. There's a lot better ways to spend $6.5 billion that would lead to longer-term lowering of greenhouse gas emissions. So I'm wondering if the author of the bill has any comments on any of those points.
Chair Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative West, thank you for, making those comments. And I think, if you do just look at this piece that you're referencing, they are assuming 6 garages. And what we're doing with this bill, yes, there is the goals of the procurement by 2030 of zero emissions. But, the majority of the bill is a plan. And without a plan, we won't really know the true costs because these are assumptions. Yeah. And if you look at point number 2, too, they don't talk about the saving estimates. And I think as some of my testifiers talk about, what about the public health savings that we have for communities like mine, North Minneapolis, who are disproportionately impacted by air emissions like, from these diesel buses. And those are not in considerations as they have identified here around the saving estimates. And so I think what we're doing here is actually looking at requiring having a plan so that we could plan out into the future. The cost might be 6.5 or it might be lower. And so I think that, if without having a plan in place, Mr. Chair, I don't think that we can actually understand the true cost of what we're trying to do here with zero-emission buses.
Okay, follow up. Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chair Lee, for bringing this really important bill and starting this pushing forward this discussion. I actually want a few things I want to comment on. First, Representative West, I appreciate your comments, and what I would say is let's talk about the best ways to get carbon emissions down. I'd be thrilled to work with you and anyone on your ideas for the best ways to do it. This reducing carbon emissions, tackling climate change should not be a partisan issue. And if this is the beginning of more and more of that, I welcome that and would love to work with you on that. I will point out that that the data in that fiscal note was as of 2025, so this is a fast-changing space, and I imagine that will change over time. I also want to say I appreciate that there's off-ramp language put in there. That's a prudent financial thing to do. I do want to make the point that that we don't have an off-ramp from climate change. I would love it to ask the Earth for one, but unfortunately the Earth doesn't negotiate with us on that. The other thing I would say is what we're trying to do here is evolve a very entrenched system. And when you try to evolve or change an entrenched system, and you can look back in history pretty much at any technology transition, the entrenched system always says, that's too fast, that's too hard, it's going to cause disruption. That's what entrenched systems do. So we shouldn't ignore those comments, but we should recognize the context in which they're provided. So we need to push forward on this, not just for the climate aspects of it, but for the other benefits. Even if some may not be with me and with the science on climate change, that, you know, it's a roadmap to a better way of living. So we talk about the reduction in air pollution. Air pollution kills probably around, impacts about 3,000 people a year that die in Minnesota relative to that. So there's some significant other things. Yeah, I also want to point out, I went on a tour of New Flyer this past summer. And today, this year, 15% of their vehicles, of their buses that they're producing, and they don't do school buses, they just do transit buses, are EVs or zero emission. Next year, it's going to be 40%. So there's a lot of places where these are going. We have unique situations that we need to work through, but I really appreciate this bill, and I thank you, Chair Lee.
Representative Santamir.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Lee, for bringing this bill. Thank you for the conversation. You know, I think a few times this session, you know, in committee, we've kind of skirted around the issue of climate change. I know that I think it came up last week. And, you know, I've been actually thinking a lot about what you said, Representative Murphy, you know, and talking about, you know, that there's not agreement about climate change, right? And I think, you know, I think you said something about climate change opponents, right? And I think you meant people who don't believe in climate change, but I'm a climate change opponent, right? Like, I don't want climate change to happen. And I think, you know, kind of what you believe about the future, I want that to be true. I wish that was true. But I have to say on the record, I don't believe it. And I think about these kind of moments where we have, you know, decision points, right? And I think a lot about 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And I imagine that many of us would be filled with regret about what we choose not to do. The technology is not perfect. And I think, you know, Representative West, it's more expensive, it's imperfect, it will take us to change our infrastructure. I think that is all true. And I think if we wait for the technology to be perfect, it will be too late. And I really do believe that. Articles are coming and saying, we have 2 years to turn the tide on this, and it is most likely too late. So I just have to say on the record that I think we need to make movement on this, even if it isn't perfect, even if it takes us changing our infrastructure. And I think to the point you made earlier, Chair Lee, we pay no matter what. And people are paying right now with poor air quality. So I really appreciate the provision about, you know, ensuring that environmental justice communities are prioritized in this. I think we will pay with a lot of human misery in the future if we don't make these changes. So thank you for this bill.
Representative Petersburg and then Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so, you know, I think all of us understand that if we want to change, you do have to have some goals out there, and you have to have some deadlines. My guess is that these off-ramps, these procurement exemptions, will be used virtually across the board, because I think it's going to be difficult to implement 100% by that time, which means we will continue to move this. In regards to the discussions around climate change, I'm not aware of any time in any history in which climate change has been static. There's always been some change one way or the other, and so the question is where we go from here. And I think it's important for us to know that is an important piece. But the thing that I wanted to also talk about is a $6 billion increase in infrastructure costs that also gets included then in the subsidy that will be needed in order to maintain the bus system into the future. And so not only are we talking about the infrastructure cost, but that cost will be built into the subsidy for the ride share, et cetera. So just for us to understand that expansion, when those buses get replaced into the future, that's going to have to be built into the cost of riding the bus and the subsidy that's being paid for by taxes and so forth. And so just so we don't think that it's $6.5 billion and one and done, there's going to be additional costs to that. So there's some issues with this bill, and I know that we'll probably see this in the final bill, but I think there's something that we also have to be a little bit cautious about in regards to the cost. And Mr. Chair, after this bill is laid over, if we could have a little discussion about the process moving forward, I'd appreciate that as well.
That we were
Thank you.
planning that. Yep.
Okay, Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative. I mean, I really feel like we're both really concerned about the same things. I just look at climate change as something that needs to be proved out. And I keep asking the same question. What do the goals look like when we get there? The reality is there's not complete science agreement on climate change. In August 30th, 1,609 climate scientists said it's not real. It's not an emergency. 2 of them were Nobel laureates. We have to make sure we don't get our information from one side. And one side, if it's government and academia that supports the government, we need to make sure if we're wrong on this, we're going to look at a huge change in our economics in this country. And if we can't achieve that, if we don't know what the outcome looks like, I ask, what's the carbon level? It's at 416 right now. What's it going to look like here if we all do this? And I haven't been given the answer. And the answer is we don't know, and we never will. If you look back to 1980, and I've been around for a while, in 1980 they talked about global cooling. It's changed. At one point, the experts said the Statue of Liberty was going to be up to elbows in water. If you look, I just saw a map. It was a geographic map where they went year to year to year since 1991, and they showed the coastline. The water levels aren't coming up. You need to prove that to us. I'd be all in for it if you could prove it, but I haven't seen it. And that's the stuff we need. And that's why I keep asking, because it's going to change our cost. At an intersection in Alexandria, when 48 gas pumps need to be replaced with electric EV charging stations, it's going to cost at that corner, it's going to cost $24 million because they're $982,000 a piece. We as Minnesotans need to know that. It will corrupt our whole economy if we're wrong. I just want to be right. So that's my only thing. But I appreciate your comments, and I feel the sincerity in it, and I appreciate it. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Representative Kraft.
Mr. Chair, Representative Murphy, and Chair Lee, again, I want to thank you for bringing this. The thing that's, you talk about what's it going to cost. What's it going to cost to our kids, to our grandkids, if we get this wrong? The science, the stuff you mentioned is just not true. I wish it was. Man, I wish it was. Where we need to get to, where the Earth becomes in balance with the amount of heat coming in and going out, is over time is roughly 350 parts per million of carbon. As we're over that, it will drive heating up. Yeah, as I said, there's so much wrong in what you said, but I look forward to sitting down with you and we can talk about this because we cannot get this wrong. We need to do it prudently, we need to do it responsibly, but we cannot get this wrong.
Okay, any further discussion? We're almost ready to adjourn. To Representative Petersburg's question, I believe.
Did you want to lay this over first?
Oh, well, yeah, any other questions?
If not, I just have a few closing comments, Mr. Chair, and then you guys could proceed with your business.
Okay, well then, House File 3588 as amended will be laid over for possible inclusion. What, I'm sorry. Oh, you wanted to?
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee members, for the robust discussion around, I think the impact of what this bill would do to the larger conversation about climate change. And I think to the substance of the bill, some of the concerns that were raised from Minta or to Representative Petersburg, I really appreciate you bringing that forth. And I think that the bills that I have today, really is trying to get at how could we really address or really have good budgeting process. And so I'm open, Mr. Chair, for all committee members as this bill is considered for, moving forward in the process to address some of the concerns that are raised. And I just want to be, acknowledge that, as we move forward, I'm open to seeing how could we make this bill better and address some of the concerns that were raised today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We're open to that. So then, House File 3588 as amended will be laid over for possible inclusion.
So I want to get to some procedural issues. We won't be meeting this evening. We have a amendment deadline tomorrow, 1 o'clock. We'll be doing markup and amendments on Thursday. We can be somewhat flexible on that.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
So if you're doing the markup or write-up, are we having any testimony on the
Yes,
final bill?
Absolutely.
The question that I have is, I'm assuming that some of these bills, in some portion or not, will be coming onto that bill as an amendment form.
Correct.
And so I'm wondering, that puts a very difficult time for us in order to get
Yeah.
amendments to the amendments, when we won't know what they are until at least noon tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so you're not anticipating a Friday meeting for markup or
We
anything?
don't know. I can talk with you in your office and we might be able to be more flexible on that.
That's my only concern.
Because I have there's definitely some amendments I'd like to do as well.
Right, and I know you've been very kind in giving us up to 1 o'clock, I think, tomorrow for amendments. But being that these bills now are coming forward, we don't know what they might look like, and yet you're planning on having them as part of your bill. So
Yeah.
it's important for us to have an opportunity to at least look at that. So I
Yeah, so
appreciate
why
that.
don't we meet and, figure out
Okay.
a fair way to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, with that, any other questions? We are adjourned.